Welcome to the Always Better Than Yesterday YouTube channel. I am your host, Ryan Hartley. This channel is for heart-centered leaders just like you. I hope our time spent together helps you leave a heartprint where those around you are left better than yesterday. These interview sessions are sponsored by our great friends at Elevate Online Marketing. On episode 199, I'm joined by Sarah Arnold-Hall. Sarah is a high-performance coach, and she is the host of the podcast How to Take Action. Sarah helps people take action. We have an amazing conversation about action, about procrastination, and all the good things that she is putting out into the world. I came across Sarah through an image that she shared on her Instagram profile. I highly recommend you go check that out at Sarah Arnold-Hall, and it's the one that's pinned top left of her grid. It's all about showing up daily. I think she's perfectly articulated what it means to show up and give your best, and the difference between what we think that means and what it actually means. We have a wonderful conversation. I hope this conversation inspires you to take meaningful action in your life, and I hope that it leaves you better than you were yesterday. Here we go, episode 199 with Sarah Arnold-Hall. Sarah, welcome to Always Better Than Yesterday podcast. How are you?
I'm good. Thanks for having me.
I love that. You're here. I love the things that you put out into the world, and you're really passionate about doing the impossible, but more specifically for women. I heard you say that the current generation of women are standing on the shoulders of all those that have gone before. Like, what does that really mean to you? What does that really inspire in you?
The idea of that came from my grandma, who is an incredible woman. She's worked so hard to support her community. She actually received an award from the Queen for all of the service she's done for the community. And she kind of also talks about standing on the shoulders of the women who got her to be where she is. So the suffragettes who allowed her to be someone who could have a bank account and could have the right to own property and tons of different other fantastic rights that we should all have. And so I was like, well, if she's standing on those shoulders, like, then I must be really standing on the shoulders of so many other amazing women. And I realized that actually it's I think it's my duty to go after the things that I truly want, because so many women in the past couldn't do that, and they are now in the situation, or I'm now in the situation where I can. And so I think, how could I not, when so many women fought for the right to have, and not just women too, men as well. Plenty of men were fighting for these rights too, and so many different people will be standing on the shoulders of their generations of amazing people. But without them, we wouldn't really have the opportunities we have today. And I'm like, let's not waste them.
Do you think there's stigma is probably too strong a word, but ambition, does that bring about some kind of judgment, some barriers? Like, how does that how do you navigate being an ambitious woman?
Yeah, definitely in New Zealand, we have a lot of what's called tall poppy syndrome. Do you know that saying?
I've heard that phrase. An Australian friend of mine introduced me to that. So it's maybe it's a down under thing.
Yes, I think it's a down under thing we have. So tall poppy syndrome is the idea that there would be a tall poppy in a field of other poppies, and you want to chop it down because it doesn't look like all the other nice ones. And we do have a bit of that in New Zealand. I think it's prevalent all around the world, but particularly in New Zealand, this kind of idea that you should be happy with what you have and grateful for that. And you don't want to be ambitious, because who are you to go after your dreams? You should be helping everyone else. It shouldn't be, it should never have a selfish kind of means to it. But I think if we all go after the things that truly make us happy, we're going to inspire others to be that. There's actually a beautiful Marianne Williamson quote that says, when you shine, you give permission for other people to shine. I butchered it, but it's something like that.
Yeah, I really buy into that phrase. Is so you've chosen to use coaching, which is a wonderful, powerful tool. You and I, share the passion for coaching, and why is it that you're inspired then to help people take action?
I realize that it's like the core of so many issues. So we have the internet now, we have Google, you can pretty much Google your problem and get a ton of different answers of how to achieve it or your goal. And there's just so much information about what to do. But then why are we all not achieved our goals yet? Like, it comes down to because we're not doing the things. And for me, that used to be a huge problem. I really struggled with procrastination. I wanted to start a business. In fact, I tried to start many businesses. I had that starting energy, but not the follow through energy. And once I figured out how to get myself to do stuff, I started documenting that process and sharing it online. And people were like, how did you get yourself to go down to the mall and just ask strangers to subscribe to your YouTube channel? Like, and I was like, well, I've got all the tools now to get myself to take action. So I think that that's what's missing. And I think if we could help the whole world figure out how to get themselves to take action, we would have, we'd have a different climate. Like, the whole climate issue would be a whole other thing, I think.
Yeah, that's really powerful. I interviewed a guy called Dr. John DeMartini, and he was saying that, like, creation at a molecular level is the synthesis of opposites, a thesis and an antithesis. It's beyond my grasp, but I get the concept, which is that, there is an element of duality and polarity in our lives, and obviously the opposite of action is inaction. And I know on your website you have a quiz for procrastination, which I procrastinated doing. But why might, I guess, because sometimes we can focus on taking more action, which is fine. But I also believe that there's like an elastic band at play, which means that sometimes to go more into action, we might have to ease the tension for the inaction. In your experience, what are some of the ways maybe you have procrastinated, or the people that you serve and work with, and what are some of the core causes of procrastination?
Yeah, well, ultimately, procrastination is an action. Even if it doesn't look like action, it's usually some kind of action. So our actions come from our emotions. We do or don't do things based on what we feel. And so the 5 things that I see that are the most common for people procrastinating, this is totally the quiz. So if you want to do the quiz, I'm going to share it with you now. But there are 5 emotions. And so what they are confusion, overwhelm, self-doubt, fear, and lethargy. These are the 5 key emotions. There are some others, but I think they mostly fall into these categories. And if you can identify what is the particular emotion that's holding you back, which one of those 5 is the main one, you are halfway there, because you're able to go, okay, so I'm confused. Why am I confused? What's going on? Or I'm overwhelmed, or I'm just don't really feel like doing it. I'm feeling lethargic. That's kind of the, I think, what I see the main things that I work with my clients on that are holding them back.
Hey, my friends, I hope you're enjoying the interview so far. Just wanted to take a quick moment to let you know that we are in the middle of our first cohort of Good Fathers, a 6-week group coaching program for dads. It is my heart to create a space for these good men, to leave them better for those who call them dads. We're having some intentional, purposeful conversations that I can see the men in front of me are transforming in front of my eyes. They are having conversations that they've never had with anyone else, and it is powerful, and it is going to help them be much more loving and intentional fathers, intentional partners. And because I have such undying belief in the power of this group, I am bringing about a second cohort. Starting on Monday the 9th of January 2023, we're going to kick off with cohort 2. If you are a dad that wants to be even better for those who call you dad, then head over to the website abty.co.uk/goodfathers. The link is in the show notes. Have a look, and it'd be my honor and privilege to have you come and join us and other good men from around the world as we journey in what it means to be a good father. Here we go. Back to the interview. Yeah, it's my wife sometimes walks past the room and she'll see me clearly like inactive or doing things that are not productive, shall we say, and she's like, what are you doing? I'm like, oh, well, I'm a creative. But in really, I'm like overwhelmed. There is an overwhelm of, oh man, my notebook is full, I don't know where to start, and inevitably scroll hole appears.
Right. I think actually what we the problem isn't that we don't want to do it. The problem is expecting ourselves to want to do it in the first place. Like I wake up every morning and I dread doing this. I mean, I dreaded coming on with you, not because I didn't want to, because that's what my body does when it wants to do anything. It's not coming onto this podcast specifically. I was dreading coaching my own clients. I was dreading seeing my own friends sometimes. I dread going to the dance class that I love today. I just dread stuff. I just don't want to do any of it. I'd rather be in bed. I'd rather just not do. And sometimes I don't even want to go to bed. So our brains are just wired, I think, to stop us from doing anything that's going to expend any energy in case we need that energy to forage for berries or run away from a tiger or something.
I've come to the understanding that sometimes that's almost like a spiritual warfare. It's almost that in dreading or doubting, it's almost taking us further away from the very thing that's going to bring more love and light to the world.
So true.
And I know that you've got a really powerful way of rephrasing imposter syndrome.
Do I? What is
you do? Well, I've seen it this morning.
Powerful way of rephrasing imposter syndrome?
You've said that it's an indicator of ambition.
Oh, yes, 100%. So I think that when our view on imposter syndrome is that it's like a bad thing. And I think that imposter syndrome is a good thing, because if you think about any hero's journey that anyone's ever been on, they're underqualified when they begin. They're overambitious and underqualified. I think of like Katniss Everdeen from the Hunger Games, or Harry Potter, or anybody who's ever taken on anything, where we start out underqualified, and that's not a problem. We actually become qualified on the journey. So if you're feeling some imposter syndrome, don't let it be a problem. Let it be normal and be like, yeah, of course I don't feel qualified to do this thing, or of course I don't want to do it.
That's a message that really resonates with my community. I released a podcast episode about this time last year, and it was exactly on that topic. And I phrased it, "We don't need no education." It's a Pink Floyd song, and it was, obviously we want our doctors and those surgeons to be qualified, right? Because we don't want to be going on their table without knowing that they're at least competent, right? But you're absolutely right. For me in this podcast journey, confidence has become the result, not the requirement of me showing up. And that feeling of imposter, I find it funny. I agree with you. It is a sign that, I just literally haven't done this before. No wonder I feel like this way. And the only way to get that gone is to take action and to do the thing, because I think we underestimate our natural ability to learn. We touch something hot, we learn, oh, don't do that again. So when people say to me, give me some feedback, I'm like, no, just do 10. If you want to start a podcast, just do 10 episodes without judging yourself. You'll know exactly what you want to improve.
Oh, I love that. That's such a good way of thinking about it. Because just show up and do it.
Right? Yeah. And one of the quotes on your grid says, "Are you willing to be judged?" Because that's outside of our control, right?
Right. We can't control what other people think of us. But you are the master of other people's thoughts in your own mind. So you get to decide what other people are thinking if you want, because we don't know what people are thinking. Even if I tell you what I'm thinking, I could be lying. You will never know what I really think, and I'll never know what you really think. So therefore, why worry about what you're thinking or what I'm thinking? I'm just going to decide that Ryan's excited to have me on his podcast. I'm just going to, you know what? That's what I decided that you're feeling, because I can never know, even if I ask you.
And then that creates your reality. Our perception will create our reality. And, I've come to this, when it comes to creation, I've come to this binary understanding that we can either do that from the outside in, or we can do that from the inside out. And the outside in is like, okay, well, how does it need to look? What's the expectation on me? What are people going to say about it? What is that cultural expectation? Is it good enough? Almost like giving away my power, and I'm having to perform to meet some standard, versus connect with the love of it, do it for the love of it, share it for the love of it, and be an expression of it. And I think one of the things that, particularly in the business world, is there's a question of, how are you different? What's your what's your USP, how are you different? And I think when we create from the heart first, we don't understand that question, because it's like I'm not looking around at other people. I'm expressing
Mm.
myself from a position of love, and I guess that judgment starts to quieten down a bit, because my guide becomes my inner love and passion for what I'm doing.
Ah, I love that so much. It's reminding me when I first started my business, I thought I had to have a niche because it's what everybody says,
Of
right?
course,
You've got to
right?
have a niche. You're going to be in business, you have a niche.
Yeah.
And there's actually a term that's been coined called niche drama, because so many people have niche drama about what their niche is going to be. And for so long, I tried to pick one and be like, if I would just do this or I'll do that. And then after a while, I was like, I'm kind of just making money without even having a niche. And people are like, okay, what do you do as a coach? What's your niche? I'm like, I help people do things that they want to do. I help people, anyone, achieve anything. I'm kind of have a
Which is
broader
like the
scope of
opposite of a
goals.
niche, right? That is like, yeah,
Right.
I'll help anyone and everyone.
And then I was like, I've just made a lot of money doing this.
Yeah.
Wait a second, maybe I don't need a niche. And I also heard the quote that you shouldn't choose a niche until it slaps you in the face, which I kind of love, because now I feel like I have a clearer kind of general direction. I help people take action. But even that, I've not chosen an audience that's to. It's not, only working mums or something. And it's not also for one specific goal. I'm really solving a problem that I'm passionate about, but it doesn't feel like it sits in a particular niche.
Yeah, I'm with you. So I've been running this company 5 years, and only this year have I started to do something for a particular niche, and that's fathers. So I've literally just started a fathers group for 6 weeks, and we're going to journey, and I'm going to help good men become even better fathers. And that kind of niche found its way to my manifestation just through my passion and my love for good men, and seeing a need for that group. But it's yeah, that it's emerged rather than being forced, is what I'm.
Right. Yeah, exactly. So instead of picking a niche, it just came, like, it eventually emerged.
Just made sense.
Yeah.
Maybe it slapped me in the face. Maybe it slapped me in the heart and said, if you don't do this, who will?
Exactly.
One of the things that I absolutely, what captured my heart and my mind for your page was the one that I think you've pinned to the top of your Instagram page. It went absolutely viral. Facebook, LinkedIn, Instagram. I'm not on Pinterest. I'm sure it went nuts there too. It's the one about showing up daily and what that really looks like. Tell us a little bit about what inspired that image particularly.
Yeah, the inspiration came from the fact that I blogged every day for 2 years. And I set out to do that. I started out because I actually started out doing it as part of overcoming my procrastination, because I had a blog for 3 or 4 years before that. And I had posted maybe 10 posts in total. And my best friend used to have to actually come over and press the button but publish. Like, she's like, I'm fed up with this. Like, we're just publishing it.
Yeah.
And I would put out so few. And so I decided, okay, what I'm going to do is I'm going to blog every day for 2 years. I was inspired by a man named Sean West, who said, if showing up every day for 2 years is going to solve all your problems. And I was like, okay, I'm going to give it a shot. And he says as well, the reason most people don't do this is because it's that advice is not microwavable. You can't just pop it in and easily solve it. So I showed up every day for 2 years. But what I think people imagine when I say I blogged for 2 years was that I wrote 1,000 words a day, chucked it up, put it, sent it out onto all the platforms, did everything. Really, all I did was I showed up on my blog in some way every day. And sometimes that was one sentence, or even there's one blog post that says, please hold for more. That was the blog post. And I was like, you know what? That's what I have to offer today. I don't have a lot. Yeah. And sometimes I did have those 1,000-word blog posts, but I was showing up a little bit every single day, no matter what I had to give. If I had 2% to give, I was giving that. And I think that takes the pressure off the idea that you need to show up 100% all the time to have consistency. Consistency is really just about just doing something, and then you're not breaking the chain.
Yeah, I'm fortunate enough to be in the corner of business women who are also mums, and there's this expectation on self that they want to do it all, can do it all, and one of my favorite questions I've learned to ask them is, what is right for now?
Oh, that's
What
good.
is right for now? Because I understand that, yeah, there's a book called The One Thing, isn't there? And in that it talks about, if you want to achieve excellence, you have to do one thing and do it well. And that just simply means that not just one thing and like you focus on your business and you leave your family to go hungry, but it means in this moment, what am I focusing on? Am I doing that with all of my intentionality?
Oh, so good. I teach a process in my coaching program called best friend calendaring,
Ooh.
and it's similar to this idea. And what you do is, the broad scope of it is to set up your calendar like you're setting it up for your best friend. So you would never make your best friend do something evil, like 12 hours of work in a row with no breaks. You're going to make a calendar that looks really nice. But the beauty of having it on everything on a calendar and not on a big long to-do list is that all you have to do is the thing that is scheduled for that exact moment,
Right.
and nothing else.
Yeah.
There's no, oh, look, I mean, I used to spend more time looking at my list and deciding what to do next than I would be executing the things on the list. And so once it's just that one thing in front of you, right now, that's all you got to do. You don't have to feel guilty. There's nowhere to go. There's nothing else to do. It's just that thing. So freeing.
I've seen you talk about the power of a to-don't list.
Yes.
Why
Yeah.
might that be useful for someone who might live their life by to-do lists?
Yeah. So, man, I mean, I love a good list. I'm not hating on the list people, because I get it. I still write lists. I just don't use them as a productivity tool. I don't keep them. I then transfer everything to a calendar.
Yeah.
But a to-don't list I do actually keep, because it's very easy to check off that I didn't do that. On my to-don't list is like, I'm not going to write a book right now. That's just, one day I really want to, but I've got it sitting there. To don't right now is to write a book. And to have that means that I'm not like feeling this pressure of, oh, I really need to do that thing. I've put it to the side. One day this will get done, but for right now, it is not being done on purpose.
Yes, because if we haven't intentionally decided not to do that, subconsciously it's still on our list and we're carrying it around.
Exactly.
Mm.
Yeah.
So
You're
that,
just holding it in your head.
yeah. So you're actually giving yourself almost freedom. It's like you're carrying the bags of shopping, right? And I guess you get to put a bag down.
Yeah, you just get to put the bag down, and the bag doesn't disappear. You get to see it, like it's over there. We're going to put it down over there where we can still see it. So we're not like panicked, because I think what often happens is that feeling of like, oh yeah, I was going to do that. And then we get distracted off kind of thinking about how we're one day going to write a book. But instead we just
Controlling what you
decide
can.
we're not going to write a book right now.
Yeah, I love that. That's really powerful. Before we move on from the word consistency, I think people forget that they're in control of defining what consistency means. Some people that, the Gary V's of this world post 5 times a day on 16 different platforms. But for me, I think I'm very consistent. And I think a lot of people recognize my consistency, because I think this episode is 199. And
Ooh.
yeah, so we're talking about 4 years worth of every week. But my consistency is once a week. And I just haven't stopped, and so it doesn't have to be 3 times a day. It doesn't have to be every single day. I think if people took more control over what consistency meant to them, because I think sometimes there's a a well-intentioned optimism, which then doesn't become sustainable.
Right. We try to set our goals or our plans from our most productive self. And we're like, yeah, you can easily put out 5 posts because you feel like putting out 5 posts today. And then tomorrow comes and you fall off, right? You have to set a maximum as well as a minimum of what you're going to do. Actually set like, you know what, I'm never going to post. I actually do this with my podcast. I don't put out more than 1 episode a week, because if I do, I could I'm like, oh, I could have this person on, I could do this idea. But then some weeks I'm not going to feel like putting any out because I've just done so many, right? 100%. I would definitely agree that consistency, I mean, oftentimes as well, when we think about consistency, we're imagining it all looking like, almost we're replacing consistency with perfection, like perfect fonts, perfect audio, for example, in your podcast, or the perfect like I have right now, one picture, then one carousel, then one picture and one carousel, and like this idea that it has to be like that. And I was thinking about it earlier today, like, what if I just stopped posting like that? I don't have to do that. If it's working, that's great. But if it's stopping me in some reason, then that's just a consistency that's just a perfectionism in disguise.
Yeah. That stops a lot of people.
It does.
And I think what you've just said there is the gift of that discomfort is an invitation to do something differently.
Yeah. There's almost always a better way.
Yeah.
That's my belief.
Yeah. You're a certified high performance coach. My background is in the police, and there was a lot of talk about high performing teams, high performing cultures. And I think the thing that they really got wrong was that they confused two different types of high performance, in my perspective. And I'd love to know yours in a second. They confused this desire to be high performing over the long term, consistent, continuous improvement, excellence. And they confused it with the fact that they're an emergency service, which requires that type of elite high performance in the moment. Usain Bolt runs 100 meters in 8-9 seconds. And they kind of wanted both. Is the sustained continuous improvement over the long term, whilst also being able to deal when there hits the fan. Right. And I think merging those two perspectives ended up burning people out, because there was nothing more to give. There was no more capacity and capability left within the system or within the people to achieve either the high performance in the moment or the high performance over the long term. Someone that's trained and coached in high performance specifically, what does the words high performance mean to you?
Yeah, well, the distinction that I would start by making is I think that high performance in the moment that you're talking about is peak performance, where you peak, and a peak is not supposed to stay at the peak. Otherwise, that's not a peak. Right. It drops again. And so if you're going for peak performance, that's great. That's the Usain Bolt stuff. Sprinters peak, boom, boom, boom. Marathoners, they're high performers a lot across, if we're talking specifically within a race, across a longer term. And so for me, high performance isn't about having that peak, and it's certainly not about doing more. I actually posted a post the other day that the caption was how to do less. And the first comment immediately was, this isn't high performance. Well, yes, it is. It absolutely is high performance, because when you cut out all the fluff that you're doing, like, for example, making your bed. I know a lot of people are big fans of making a bed, and if it works for you, amazing. But for the people like me who feel like that is just a task that first thing in the morning, immediately they're failing at. Nobody wants to start off their day on the foot of, having failed at something. I just stopped making myself do it. Sometimes I do it, sometimes I don't, but I stopped making it be a thing that I need to be a high performer at across the board all the time. And I make my bed and I do everything right. I'm just like, no, that's not one of the things. That's not what makes me successful, whether or not I've got a bed that's
it makes me laugh, because I think on talking about the 5 a.m. club, I think J.K. Rowling says I wake up at 10.
Yeah.
And I guess what it comes down to is that one size doesn't fit all, one size fits one. And so I guess the common denominator is self-awareness.
Knowing exactly what works for you. I think when we look at why we do the things, it's really important. So I also see a lot of people really strive to have a perfect morning routine.
Sure.
And they're doing oil swishing, oil pulling in their mouths, and they're doing flossing, and they're doing workouts and journaling and hand squeezing lemons. And there's all sorts of different things we're supposed to do, journaling and all the things. But ultimately the idea behind why you're doing all of those things is to set yourself up with a mindset for the right day. So why don't we just jump straight to that? My favorite thing to do in the morning is to lie in bed with my eyes still closed and think, what do I want to think today?
Yeah.
And I just jump through all of that. I'm not working out. I'm not reading. I'm like, this might be like, people think, what do you mean? You're supposed to be a high performer. You're supposed to get up and, do it all. I'm like, no, I wake up and I just think about what do I want to think? And I just skip all of that.
Yeah, because if we're too busy focused on what we're doing, we're not being. And I think
Mm-hmm.
all things flow from our being, and I've been fortunate enough to have people like Deborah Rosman, who's the CEO of a company called HeartMath Institute. And what she talks about, I see you nodding, so you're familiar with HeartMath. So what she talks about is that, we gain access to better levels of creativity, wisdom, just, particularly for my job in the past, which is about leading team of analysts, critical thinkers, problem solvers. That becomes more possible when you create coherence between the heart and the mind, because you gain more
Mm.
access to the prefrontal cortex, meaning that you're actually more logical, rational, and good at problem solving through your state of being, through your state of doing less.
Mm. I love that.
Mm. It's funny, isn't it? Because how often in business they go, "Oh yeah, well, let's workshop this. Let's brainstorm. Let's workshop it." And it's almost like forcing creativity, forcing innovation. There's hierarchies, there's expectation, there's pressure, there's task lists that aren't being done in the day job because you're in a workshop, and all of it is just restricting our prefrontal cortex and our natural abilities to that innovation and inspiration flow.
100%. Yeah. I think we are oftentimes just focused on all the wrong things.
Yeah.
It's not that we can't focus on some of those things, but it's bringing it back to that idea of the one thing, really focusing on what actually matters and asking how that's going to, get you the results. Maybe the workshopping it isn't really what you need right now.
Yeah. And I don't think people take a moment to slow down and understand the significance of what you just said around, sometimes I lie in my bed, I close my eyes, and I think about how I want to think that day. Because the opposite of that is, the first thing is I open my eyes and I check my phone.
Mm-hmm.
And I've already outsourced most of my thinking. I'm
Yeah, well,
receiving
insourcing
information.
it. Yeah.
100%. Yeah. So absolutely. So I'm receiving tons of information that's telling me stuff, whereas you've asked yourself a question, which is about bringing that through you for the rest of the day.
Mm-hmm. It's like you start off creating rather than consuming, just in the thoughts that you're thinking.
Yeah. You said earlier about that's that master of, I'm the master of thinking of what they're thinking. But even that is, then you start to become the master of your own thinking.
Mm-hmm.
Meaning, I guess you're more shielded against the views and the opinions of other people, because your inner guidance, your inner voice goes, this is what I'm going to do today.
Yeah, you've primed yourself. I used to actually journal every single morning on 3 questions. So after I've just said all about not journaling, I'll ask myself these questions, still sometimes ask them in the shower. Sometimes I do still write them out. But the 3 questions are: what result do I want today? Who do I need to be to create that result? And now that I already am that person, what do I believe? What do I do? What do I say? What do I eat? What do I wear? And I'm starting it off, priming myself for the person like that I want to show up as, so that already, as soon as, then I open my email later on and I get, some bad news or something, and I already know how I'm going to respond to that, because I've actually planned my thoughts ahead of time. Oh yeah, this is the time to think the thought. I know exactly what to do, for example, is a thought that I love. I wake up every morning and think, I'm going to think today that I know exactly what to do. So when that email comes in and I'm like, I know exactly what to do. It's okay.
You were once an employee, you were once employed, and you've gone on this journey of becoming a coach, finding something that you're passionate about, finding you've got a cause to contribute to. Talk to us a little bit about that process. I think one of the things I really liked you said the other day is that, you can see the journey. You can go back and look at the first YouTube video, and I have the same kind of perspective. Like, first interview, I look back and I think, I've come a long way. And it's for all to see, and it's wonderful and it's amazing. But I'd love to know a bit more about your journey and how you've come to build this wonderful business that you lead.
Yeah. I mean, it's so funny when you say that I was an employee, because I think back and I'm like, was I an employee? Yeah, I guess I was. But I never set out to be an employee. I always wanted to work since I was about 16 years old. I wanted to work for myself. I was like trying to be that person before I was. So I was only ever employed as like a means to kind of pay for while I could work on my business. So I studied psychology and philosophy, and a lot of people will say, oh yes, psychology, that's great. That's a great background for coaching. And actually philosophy has been the best background for coaching, because philosophy, I think coaching is applied philosophy. You're questioning the premise of the truths about the way that you're thinking in the world. And you're able to rethink the models of how the world should be. And that's really what I think philosophy is about. So I studied psychology and philosophy, and then thought at the time I was going to become a psychologist. And then I met some wonderful psychologists who I adore and think the work is amazing, but I realized it was going to be super heavy stuff. And I was like, I don't know, I kind of envisioned like helping people like do the stuff that lit them up, not the stuff, not get out of the stuff that just kept them down. And while I think that there's a balance, I think there are two sides of the same coin. I wanted to do that, but I hadn't even heard of coaching. So I was like, okay, I'm going to go out and try this entrepreneurial journey. I tried a bunch of different things. I was a travel blogger, a fashion blogger. I started a t-shirt company. I had all of these different things that all were total flops, and for a great reason. I'm so happy that they were, because they led me to finding coaching. And when I found coaching, I was like, it wasn't like, oh my gosh, this is it moment. It was a gradual process. And I went and got certified, and I thought being certified was just going to break down all the doors and I was going to be bulldozed over with clients. I was wrong. I ended up getting myself into a bit of debt because I had quit my job and was like, this is it. I'm just going to have clients now. And I didn't. And the marketing journey took me 2 years to figure out how to get consistent clients. And and even I want to say that that's a myth in itself. Consistent clients for me looks like my highest ever month and then nothing the next month. Like it goes, it fluctuates. But because it's consistent in the long term, I guess. And so it took me a really long time. I'm not somebody who has like I quit my job and made 6 figures in 6 weeks. It's like I quit my job and made no money for 3 months, and then very little money for 2 years while I worked in a call center answering phone calls about cats all day. That was pretty much what my entrepreneurial journey was. But a lot of what was standing in my way was that I wasn't actually doing the things that I knew that I could do. I was trying some things, but I would always try something and then kind of back out as soon as the first time. Like, for example, if I were to have started a podcast, I would have done 1 episode and then be like, oh, it didn't work. So I'll try, maybe what I need to do is YouTube. And then maybe what I need to do is a webinar. And then I would jump all over the place. And once I fully went, okay, I'm going to, with the help of a coach that I worked with, I'm going to commit to just talking with people about their problems. I just talked to hundreds and hundreds of people about their problems. And every single day I was showing up and offering to help people. And that's how my business eventually built up. But I think you could probably do it with webinars and podcasts and YouTube and all of those as well. If you just stick to one thing, I think that would be effective. Yeah. That was kind of my journey.
So why didn't you quit?
Oh, that's so interesting. I think I quit a little bit every day and just kept coming back. So across the long term,
I can't do it anymore. Yeah. I give up.
Right, like, I mean, I never considered quitting on the big scale, because the alternative to me was going and working in a job that wasn't inspiring to me. But I quit constantly, all the little things. I'd start an email list and I'd quit the email list. I'd start YouTube and quit YouTube, all the time, the whole way. I reduced the amount I was quitting as I went on.
I'm laughing in ironic amusement as someone who knows exactly the heart of what you're saying. I've never heard it said like I quit a little bit every day. Yeah, and it's that, isn't it? Sometimes I sit here and I'm like, what am I doing? Like, well, and then I sit here the next day, back again.
Yes. Yeah. And I think if we can all allow ourselves to do that, I think we have this kind of idea that you need to sustain motivation, you need to sustain productivity all the time. And I'm kind of like, what if you don't need to though? What if you can just get really good at coming back to it? So I think that's what people see from me. They're like, you're so motivated, you're always putting out stuff. I'm like, I think I'm just so good at coming back to being motivated that it doesn't look like I'm stopping being motivated. It's like tiny little chops of motivation, but they're just so put together now that you can't see that I'm actually losing motivation, like, halfway through writing a post and then getting it back in 2 minutes later, and then I'm back in.
And that comes down to the misunderstanding of what motivation really is, isn't it? It's just a wave of energy. Some people, I think Mark Ronson put in his book, the do something principle, which was one of my favorites, because people think that motivation is a requirement for showing up. And actually, invariably, it's the result. It's often the result of having shown up, being inspired by your results, and then wanting to do more of that.
Exactly. Once you've taken action, you're thinking, oh, this is great. And that thought creates the motivation. But I think there's some kind of motivation. It might not be that joyful, inspired motivation, but when you take action, you're motivated by something. So it's not the typical motivation we're thinking of, but it might be like the motivation to not be in pain, or the motivation to just get it over and done with, or something. There's something driving you. It's just not that exciting, inspiring, joyful motivation that we're all hoping we'll have all the time.
It's like the marshmallow test, isn't it? It's almost being able to say that I'm motivated to get the feeling on the other side of doing the thing that's difficult.
Right. Yes, that's such a good way of putting it. I'm not motivated to do it. I'm motivated to get the thing.
Yeah. I can't remember who said this before, but it's almost like, if you want to stay motivated and inspired, stop whilst you're enjoying it. And the reason they said that is that because when you stop whilst you're still enjoying it, as you go away, you continue to think about it. You continue to think, oh, I can't wait to get back to it. I can't say I get there. I mean, sometimes I get to the point where I go too far and it's just like, oh, and that's going to knock into my next day of energy. But what do you think about that concept, stopping whilst you're enjoying it?
I love that, especially what you're talking about from the knocking into next day. Right. My mum always says, you're stealing tomorrow's energy if you stay up too late, or you're just actually stealing from yourself in the future. And there's a great story that Greg McKeown told on his podcast. So I'm going to attempt to tell it here badly, but it's about the race to get to the South Pole, essentially. And there was a British team and there was a Norwegian team. And the British team were like, we're going to go as hard as we possibly can. We're going to smash it out. We're going to push 50 miles a day. And they were struck by bad weather. And after they pushed for 50 miles for a few days in a row, now they couldn't even push through the weather at all. And they had to rest for ages and ages. And on the other hand, the Norwegian team leader was like, okay, what we're going to do is we're going to go 15 miles a day. I don't care if we can go more. We're just going to do 15 miles. That's the max we're going to do. And then they were like, keep doing this. We're able to keep going. But they were 3 days from the actual South Pole where they was trying to get to. And they could do it in 1 day. You could see that they could push. And they didn't know where the British team was at the time. It's not like they were Instagramming them. Like, they didn't know what was going on. So they could easily be just, they could risk their chances if they don't push this last day. But the leader was like, no, we're going to stick to it. We're going to just go the 15 miles. And they ended up getting to the South Pole 33 days before the British team.
Oh, come on. That is literally modern day tortoise and the hare.
Yes, exactly. That's such a good example. Yeah.
So why don't we get that? Why do we not live our lives that way?
My theory, because I experience this, is we want to show ourselves that we can do the best we can. We want to think that our most productive self is always going to be there. So when you have one of those days that you're like, yeah, I can go 50 miles, or I can put out 5 posts, it feels so good to hit your head on the pillow at night and be like, I crushed it, put out so much. But because you're stealing from tomorrow, you then, or from next week, or whenever it's going to catch up with you, it doesn't work. But in the moment, it feels like it does. You're like, this is great. Why would I not if I can?
Yeah. And it's literally what you've got on that graphic on your page, which is that expectation we're going to hit peak performance every single day. I've never been one to share the advice of, mandating, oh yeah, you have to do a morning routine, because I think for me it's all about self-awareness. But in my own experience, the mornings give more than they take, and I think the evenings take more than they give. And what I really mean by that is that sometimes, if you don't look after yourself in the morning, you wake up and everything becomes a depletion of your energy, time, and focus. So what we then seem to do in the evening is a bit more protective. It's like, do not invade my time. This is my time. We end up staying later because we want more peace and not have to do anything or talk to anybody. Then comes the midnight snacks. And then comes what? Later mornings, getting up, lethargic energy. And so that, in my observation, has become a reason to prioritize the morning rather than the evening, albeit my most creative energy is definitely like 11 o'clock at night, when I should definitely.
Well, I have a theory that no one else seems to talk about, and I've tried to Google it. I've tried to ask people about it. I just get crickets online, but every once in a while, someone says to me that they get this, and I have a feeling you might understand. I've coined the phrase creative insomnia, because what keeps me up at night isn't worrying about what's going to happen. It's like 11 p.m. or 1 a.m. Suddenly it will be like, oh, I should do a documentary. I should do a documentary. And then I'm like, I've got to get this idea out, and I'll just, plan everything. Or I'll have an idea of a podcast episode, and it'll be so cool. And at night, I'm just so fired up about it that until I feel like I've got everything out of my head, I just can't go to sleep. So I'm like writing furiously at 3 o'clock in the morning. And then oftentimes I'll wake up the next morning and look at what I've written and think,
I feel so seen right now. Oh yeah, 100%. Albeit mine's on my notes pages on my phone, so there's this big beam of light, and my wife's like, "What are you doing?" And I'll put my phone down, and then I'll try and go back to sleep, and I'll be like, "No, there's something more." And it's almost like it's not an anxiety, but there's almost like no, you've not quite written. There's this thing, and I'm like, what is it that I'm trying to even document? What is it? What is the idea? And like you say, you look at it in the morning, you're like, dude, like what was that all about?
Right. I think
It's a thing.
this kind of brings in an idea that I think of a lot, which is what you're going to gain by doing that, or what you might lose by putting your phone down and not picking it up, is probably worth putting your phone down and not doing it. Like, even if occasionally you would have missed something great, what you're going to gain on the long term from not being up at 3 o'clock in the morning all the time doing that is probably better for you than like the 2 good ideas that's going to come out of that the whole year.
Creative insomnia.
Yeah, but I'm working on that, right? Like that's certainly not something I'm excellent at doing. When I have an idea, it's like it just comes. Elizabeth Gilbert talks about that. Do you know Elizabeth Gilbert?
Yes, yeah, I'm familiar with her work. Yeah.
Have you read Big Magic?
I have.
It's her book about.
Highly
She talks
recommend it.
about that kind of like it just comes over you, like the creativity is like a Dobby the house elf, and it just arrives and it's here, and you can't control when it comes.
Yeah, and the thing is, what she will say is, if you're not a willing participant with the idea, it will go to someone who is. So it's almost like, well, what was it trying to tell me? What am I supposed to? Yeah.
But I think you can think about that like it's like, oh, I've got to get through me so that it doesn't go to someone else. Or you can relax and be like, you know what? Someone else has got this. Because I've just joined a dance class that I had for years been trying to set up. Like this, in my head, I'm like, I'm going to do this great dance class. It's going to involve it's going to be like Soul Cycle meets dancing and coaching. It's going to be this, like, we're going to coach and we're going to dance, and it's going to be so motivational. And then I just met this woman who does it, and I'm like, this is fantastic. I can go to the class. I don't have to set it up.
Yeah.
And I get to enjoy it, and lots of other people get to enjoy it. I'm so glad that idea was like, all right, you've taken too long. We're going to Zoe instead. And Zoe did it.
Yeah, 100%. Abundance heart for sure. I have a phrase here at Always Better Than Yesterday, and it's called Heartprint. And Heartprint for me is about the legacy of our heart-centered interactions, of our heart work, bringing that thing that we really care about into the world in the service of other people. And in some way, they get left better. There's some access to some form of transformation that maybe wouldn't have been made possible if it wouldn't have been through the way that we love people and the way that we serve people. What do you think your heartprint will be?
It's interesting because I think that it's multifaceted. It's hard for me to put one thing in and say one thing. The first thing that comes to my mind is compassion, which is such an interesting one because my business isn't centered around, teaching compassion, but I actually have a lot of side projects that I do separate from my business to try to support and volunteer that I keep completely offline. But to be honest, my calling isn't even my business. My calling is outside of that. And I do other things in my life to support helping other beings. And that to me is really where my heart lies, even though there are aspects of my business where my heart is so I'm so in this. I love it. But I was going down the route where I would be a social activist. Actually, for a while, I thought I would be a social activist, but again, it was that heaviness. And so I decided that what I would do is I'm going to do the thing that I'm great at and that I love, which is helping people take action. And I'm going to get all of the joy from that and be able to use that joy to then go out and help and money as well. I have money to actually give. And so I'm going to fill my own cup with that. And I'm going to go out and help in another way rather than depleting my cup with the social activism that I wanted to do and then not having any money or resources or anything to help with. So
I love that. Who needs your help?
Oh, I'm really passionate about animal rights. I think that the animals don't have a voice, and in a lot of situations, they're not being treated at all okay. And we just disregard them because they have different bodies to us, which is something that over time you can look at racism, misogyny. It's all to do with because you don't have the right body, and the same thing is happening to the animals. And so I'm really, really passionate about helping them.
Desensitized. I've got a little dog. And sometimes I drift off, and I think I think sometimes this is a byproduct of seeing things as souls rather than the kind of the physical manifestation, like the things I can touch. And this might be a bit bizarre beyond people, but I'm going to say it anyway. I look at my dog and I think she's got eyes, she's got a little nose, a mouth, teeth, she's got a tongue, she breathes oxygen, she's got lungs. She's got all the organs I seem to have. There are so many similarities, and just fundamentally understanding that if we all came from this big bang and this evolution, how is it we've got all of the same features? And I've gone completely off topic now, but it's like when we start to look at what there are far more similarities than there are differences. And I think if we continue to put our differences front and center, we'll have continued division. And I think one of the core reasons that we are here on this planet is to use what we have to love and serve all of creation, not just other humans, not just ourselves, but that includes animals, creation, and nature.
Yes, I'm so with you.
Yeah.
100%.
Because if they're hurting, we're all hurting.
I really love that saying that if they're hurting, we're all hurting. It came to me that how could I possibly ever ask for equality as a woman to a man if I'm not providing it as a woman to an animal? If we are being the perpetrator of harm to another, how can I expect that someone won't perpetrate harm on me? And so I think that it's not just, animal rights isn't a separate issue. It's a humanitarian issue. It's a feminist issue. It's all of the different types of issues. It's all the same thing. We're all just talking about how can you do less harm.
Yeah. There's a wonderful book called Power versus Force by David Hawkins. And in that, he's almost got like a hierarchy of energetic vibrations, consciousness, effectively. He's mapped consciousness. And what he says is that there are some high vibrational frequency energies, love, peace, gratitude, enlightenment, acceptance. And there are some low vibe in terms of fear, guilt, shame, anger. And he says that anger can be a gateway to some of the higher frequencies because we are angry at certain situations. And as long as we use that anger to create equality and unity, then it can be used as a force for good. But too often in the world of activists, they use anger as a way of guilting, shaming, and creating further division, because it creates opposition. It creates, and unfortunately, I guess the heart of activism is love, is acceptance, it is equality and unity. And I hope that be the heart set and the spirit of anyone that is an activist, because it's about creating that level of equality rather than upmanship.
Yeah, it's a really interesting issue to me, because as an activist, I feel that, a lot of people say to me, well, you just have to lead by example, and while I think that's great, I don't know anybody who has suddenly gone and become an animal rights activist or started changing their views on animal rights because I led the way. Like, I wish that there were, but what actually happens is it comes from those compassionate, intense, like challenging conversations. They're not like without the guilt, without the shame, but they come from in my experience, don't come from just, well, if I'm just lovely to people, everyone will be lovely to people. It really does have to be the activist part in like the active and the activist. But I do completely agree that it has to come from a compassionate place, because otherwise you just completely miss people. Like if we just totally don't communicate.
John DiMartini yesterday said to me, he says that growth is on the border of support and challenge, and I think that as a visualization is growth in terms of a world where there are better love and compassion towards animals comes at the point where we support people in being able to do that, and when we challenge those who aren't doing that.
Yes, to raise people's ambition for what they can do. Actually, there's an influence model that Brendan Burchard talks about in his research, which is to influence anyone, you have to raise their ambition. You have to role model the way yourself. And there's one more that's completely escaped me right now, but those two are particularly important. To really raise people's ambition for what they could do, and really also role model. It's not, you can't just simply role model the way. You have to also be raising people's ambition to want to do better in that way too.
One of my favorite questions from Brendan's book, High Performance Habits, is who needs your A game? Who needs your A game? So I'm going to ask that question of our listeners right now. Just sit down and start to think about who needs your A game today? Who's going to benefit from your A game? And I'm going to ask that question of you as well, is who needs your A game?
It's so good. I love Brendan Burchard's journal that he has, and anytime I answer that question, the irony is I feel like I'm always answering, it's my future self. She needs me on my A game today, because without me being on my A game, she's not going to get what she wants. Yeah, that's the one.
I have the black one. What color do you have?
I have black as well, and red. I have red.
Black and red. Do you know what? I absolutely love that future self, because that person only gets brought into the world through who we're being in this moment.
And I'm so grateful to my past self. Anytime I think about her, I am the future self of her. And if she didn't do all of the work I wouldn't be here today. She developed me into who I am. And I'm just so grateful that she did 730 days of blogging in a row. And what drove her was thinking about this version of me, this exact version of me today, not the version of me in 10 years. She was actually thinking about the version of me who's just kind of completed the challenge, what she'd be thinking. And so without that, I wouldn't be who I am today. So I think my future self is always, and when I think about showing up for my future self, it's always for the highest purpose. I'm not sure, my future self doesn't want me to hurt anyone. My future self doesn't want me to have any bad times.
I saw Peter Crone recently talk about manifestation. Many people get it wrong. People think it's out there and it's in the future, but manifestation comes from our being in this moment. And it's like, who are we being in this moment? And everything that then comes to us is a manifestation of just who we're being. And one of the things that kind of blows my mind is that to collapse time and space your visualization of the future version of you can literally kick your ass in this moment. They can literally keep you accountable to say, if I'm going to create this person, this is what they would tell me. This is what they need me to do. This is what they need me to prioritize. So it's literally collapsing time and space, and your future self can become a real thing if we give it that time, space, and energy to think about it clearly enough and visualize it. We can use the force of that human being in this moment.
So good. 100%. And I on that manifestation topic, I always used to think that you were kind of putting it out there to that the future you out there. And my understanding, at least from what I understand about manifestation, is that ultimately it's not about sending out magic to something out there, but putting the magic within your own self. Like your brain is the mini universe that you're sending out to the universe. That is what then you show up as the person you want to be. You take action, and then of course you're going to see the result. That is exactly what happens when you put the manifestation in your own brain. In fact, there's a thing called the reticular activating system, where you're just, when you think about something, you start seeing it everywhere because your brain is automatically doing that, looking and filtering out for you. So that's kind of how the manifesting happens, and not so much like you put it out and then some magical force. Perhaps there's a magical force out there doing it, but my best understanding of manifestation is that you are the magical force.
I think that magical force is the energy we put out from our heart. So if we're putting out messages from our heart that we don't have all that we need, and we're inadequate in some way because we don't have these things, well then you're not gonna, getting those things ain't gonna change that heart set. And I love this idea that if you don't appreciate what you have, more of the same will never be enough. I saw someone posting today I'm trying to inspire millions of people, but here I am with my measly 450 subscribers. And like, if you don't appreciate the 450 you got, 450 million ain't gonna do it for you either.
There's always going to be more, because you'll be looking at the person who's got 500 million.
Right, absolutely. I want to be super respectful and conscious of your time. Thank you so much for your time, your energy, the wonderful things that you put in the world. I think, what a gift. Even though a lot of your paid services will be dedicated one-on-one time, people can still benefit and be transformed by the possibility that you're creating just in a thought process, just in a reflective image. So powerful. I think that's why it's really resonating. It's why it's really connecting with people. I think it's why your posts get shared all around the world, because in some way you're tapping into something that is both a universal truth and has the power to transform thinking. And then when we transform that thinking, it leads to some form of different action, which means that you are creating new possibilities for people with every post that you put up.
Thank you. That's such a cool way of thinking about it. I often think about how there's kind of the model for business, which is like you get all of the people in so that, a few of them will buy from you. Whereas I kind of think of it the other way around. Like I have a few people work with me one-on-one so that I can serve more people. Like this is the real, like anyone who's listening right now, this is it. This is exactly what I'm not holding anything back. Like we're having this is the conversation you could decide today that completely changes your life if you want to let it.
Love that. I'll share all your links in the show notes, and I'll be honored if you'd leave us with a final thought from your good self.
Okay. A final thought is, if you want to get yourself to take action, you have to choose a new thought, an antidote thought, something that will overcome the thought that whatever the thought is that's stopping you right now. And you just have to practice it. It's ultimately what's going to change everything. If you can pick an antidote thought that's going to change your whole life, pick a new one, like the one I was saying before. I know exactly what to do. That will change everything.
I love that. Thank you so much, my friend.
Thank you. It's so good to be on.
Thank you for making it to the end of the interview here on YouTube. I hope that our time spent together has left you a little bit better than before you push play. Before you go anywhere, please leave a comment down below, some of your key reflections, your key takeaways. I love hearing from you and what this conversation has inspired in you. Let me know what you're going to do as a result of this conversation. I will be back next Wednesday where I will share another inspiring guest. To make sure that you don't miss that, please do subscribe, hit the bell, and you will be notified as soon as it goes live. If you're curious to know how I, through Always Better Than Yesterday, can serve you, your team, your organization, please do visit alwaysbetterthanyesterday.com, and it will be my honor and privilege to help you in any way I can. Keep leading, my friends. I've been Ryan Hartley, host of the Always Better Than Yesterday podcast here on YouTube. Always love.